I want to wish a happy Veterans Day to all of the honorable veterans out there who have sacrificed their safety, their health, all the sacrifices that they've made for us to be able to preserve the American dream. I'm joined right now by Crowdsource the Truth viewer, military veteran, Iraq War veteran, Purple Heart recipient, Bill Allen. Hello, Bill.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Very well. Welcome to the show. This is actually a really great moment because this is what Crowdsource the Truth is all about. You're watching the show, you were in the comments, and it came out that you've been in battle. Why don't you tell us the story of how you got into the Army, what went on over there? You were injured, of course. You're the recipient of a Purple Heart. And again, thank you for your sacrifice. Give us the story.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, actually, I don't even know how to react, and I think a lot of veterans have a lot of problems when not problems, but when people say thank you for your service. Most all of them just did it out of love for the country, love for the guy or girl next to him, left and right, and so I appreciate it. I get all flustered when people say that. It's not to reprimand or to rebuke anybody, but it's, how do you tell somebody, when like your art and, hey, thank you for what you did. You just like, hey, it was a labor of love. So I don't want anybody to think I'm unappreciative. I just don't know how to react to when people say that. And last night I was in the shower and again, I listened to you. I have hundreds of hours of listening to you and getting out of the shower and it was brought up about that we supported, supplied, and financed ISIS. ISIS
Right.
was the predecessor of Al Qaeda in Iraq, and then we had Al Qaeda prior to that in the Arab Peninsula. And I've got about 28 months in combat. That's two different long tours, and so I've actually captured them. I've fought them hand to hand. I've been in in the same room for hours and hours with these guys, and I've heard it before. I've heard that we supported them, and it was just kind of one of those things before. Let's say I was red pilled. I thought that it was inconceivable that we supplied them, and then when I got it back out, I'll tell you all about the beginnings of my military history, or my career. I had heard that we were doing these things like dropping supplies and dropping money, and I've worked with contractors that work that were contracted by our intelligence agencies, and again, I'm not any kind of a spook or anything. I spent several years in a long range surveillance detachment, which is a kind of a special operations and military intelligence, and been out of that for a while, but so I don't have all the I'm not I don't have all the back channels that I used to have, but I've heard it, and I've seen it, and I've seen that we drop weapons to these guys, and I thought there's no way it's just so impossible to drop weapons and arm these guys and for them to be, and then the pictures start coming out of McCain and Lindsey Graham, and these are actual pictures without Baghdadi, and these are our enemies. These are our sworn. These are bad people. And I take, I enjoy the fact that we can, kill these guys. Then I get home and I see these pictures, of McCain, and then also what's his name out of Florida, Senator Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
These are horrible men, and I know also for a fact one of these guys is a CIA officer. He's an officer. I know one of the guys is a CIA officer for a fact.
Wow.
Not in this picture, but so it's kind of hit me in the last 2 years, I think, since the Trump administration has just been letting a lot of this stuff get out slowly and surely. I've read Q, I've read the WikiLeaks, I've read a lot of these dumps, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm able to corroborate and know through bits and pieces. Again, I'm not, I was a 23-year regular. They call it Big Army. I wasn't special operations, but I was Big Army, and still, I met General Flynn, just an incredible man. He brought us about 1.5 tons of hot Coke and Pepsis and Sprites in the middle of a firefight one time.
Whoa.
In a helicopter, yeah, in a pallet. The guy was
Wow.
just thinking of bringing us, sweets and stuff like that. So we had to, we had to go to fire, go get this thing. It was in a pallet, which there wasn't just like Cokes in a on the rings. It was, they dumped them in there, and we had to drag this thing off. And so he was, he's thinking of us. They were hot as hell, and it was, in the 120s, but still, again, it's just so, I worked
Something
for
that
a lot of these
small,
guys.
just a cold soda in the middle of the desert might just lift you up a little bit.
Yeah. Any veteran will tell you that Otis Spunkmeyer muffins, blueberry muffins, and the Tiger energy drinks and Rippets are what we go on. That tobacco and hate,
Wow.
those fuel us.
Wow.
So, but going back, those were just, they were passed out like, like ammunition. Otis Spunkmeyer, man, you're making me hungry right now. The chocolate ones and the blueberry ones were our energy pills. I'm from Brenham, Texas. I'm currently right now at my home in Brenham. I'm retired. I go to school occasionally. I was looking at going back, trying to do my a medical degree. I did my pre-med over at University Incarnate Word in San Antonio. Found out very fast those kids are we're in two different leagues, and sometimes it's just best that time spent after retirement may not be so well spent working on a medical degree, trying to go to medical school. So right now I volunteer. I do some speaking. I do some fundraising for some local charities. I was raised in a boys' home about 17 miles south of me in Waller, Texas, called Boys Country of Houston.
You were raised in a boys' home.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So you were an orphan.
And so spent 7. I don't know where they are. I don't know. I think they're alive. I know my father's alive somewhere, but I'm not. Again, it was. I think all in all, it was. It was serendipity. It was what was supposed to happen. I learned a lot there at that boys' home. I learned leadership and just dealing with young men, and so that's how I spent my career in my life, is training and leading young men and somewhat young women in the military. And so I think that those things happen for a reason, and I would not have gotten that had I stayed with one or both of my parents. And so I don't question those things. Those are what they are. They are what they are, and you just have to kind of accept them. I joined the military right out of didn't even finish high school, and spent on and off active and reserve time about 23 years in total on active duty. And so now I'm retired and just kind of enjoying life. I've got an 18-year-old daughter up at San Marcos at college, and then another one who's down near the coast. And so I'm very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, I think we should add, Bill. Sorry to interrupt you. We've got a bit of a delay, but I think we should add, you and I are just getting to know each other. We had a very brief phone conversation before this, but I didn't know what you were going to tell us, and I didn't know anything about your background. You were kind enough to send me some material. We've got here your award of the Purple Heart. Can you tell us a little bit? You look quite well. Pleased to see that you don't appear to be injured. Can you tell us about what happened?
Like,
and I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying you look great.
No. You know what? It's so, and I've worked with guys. I was in medical. My last, 8 or 9 years of active duty, I was in medical. And so I was made staff sergeant as in military police. I was in law enforcement. So I had to drop back to go back for my second tour. I went on active duty and had to drop rank. And so there's the discrepancy in the rank. But I ended up making E6 very early, but found out that military police just wasn't what I was really good at. Combat medic. I was a combat medic. So the Purple Heart in itself, I had we're at Cobb's. We're at what they have. FOBs are the forward operation bases, which are huge, and those have, I mean, just everything. All your fuel, all your communication, your chow, all that other stuff. So we were moved out to little Cobb's, the combat operation bases. And from there, I was with the 3rd Cavalry, 2nd Squadron, 3rd Cavalry Regiment. Those were some hard guys. A lot of people give cavalry a hard time in armor, but in scouts, those guys are just actually one of the regimental commanders for that, you know, be a deep state guy as he was Colonel McMaster, and he was the guy that I think it was 73 Easting was all about in the first Gulf War. And that unit is just an incredible unit. And so I worked with a lot of his predecessors as my unit commanders, and these guys know him very well. They went to work for him later on. And, you know, I totally get but I was at Balad Ruz, a town called Balad Ruz, and a base called Balad, which is near the Iranian border. From there, we were to interdict all the routes coming in from Iran. And I could not tell you how many Iranian intelligence agents I've talked to and captured and detained and arrested.
Wow.
Literally, maybe 100 or so like that. But,
wow.
A lot. I've got Iranian money out the wazoo. We had drugs from them. We had my first tour was just saturated with Iranians, and we always had an interpreter with us, and they could tell these guys. You know, again, it's they could tell who was an Iranian and was Persian versus us. My first tour, I actually got to meet Muqtada el-Sadr on his return back to Baghdad. He stopped and talked to me. He, again, you know, I got it. I understand everybody's perception of him. But when I met him, he was a very holy man and a very peaceful man. And this still was before the insurgency back in 2003. He and I talked, and I've always been a very stern stickler for doing the right thing, and he saw that, and he observed me for a while, and he wanted to talk to me. I didn't know who he was at the time, and he said, you know, he told me he blessed me and that he appreciated what he was doing for his country, and on his return, and then things went south, and that's not my, you know, I'm not. My contention is not that he's a good guy, bad guy, or indifferent, but I got to meet him. And he was a very, very holy man. You could tell that he cared very much for his country and his return. So, but anyways, the Purple Heart came about on Memorial Day. Memorial Day. I had a kid I knew that was killed on the same day. I had attended his funeral 1 year to the day, to the minute, and I knew him as a family friend. And he was a lieutenant who went on a rescue mission, and they were killed in the area. Well, fast forward 1 year later, I'm in about the same area. Our air had been red, and when air goes red, we don't fly. We're unable to put up our ISR.
What does that mean? Air goes red.
Air goes red or green, and that means green. You can fly. You can fly your intelligence, your ISR, your Reapers, your drones, stuff like that, or air vac, or insert, or, you know, pull out people in helicopters. When air goes red and in the desert, you have that dust, that moon dust that moves around. Our air had been red for about 2 or 3 days, and we were on a route called Route 14. And Route 14 had taken several lives. We had lost several guys up until that point. It was just a nightmare. We had fought for every inch of this route, and it came out of Balad Ruz, but what it did was it ran directly into Baghdad, and so it was used for years by Iranian intelligence and Al Qaeda in Iraq. We call them AQI, Al Qaeda in Iraq, and the 82nd had been there prior to us. They had nearly lost a platoon. They were mounted huge battles, like these just firefights that lasted for days and days. And as soon as we got on the ground, 4 of these guys were just blown to smithereens. As soon as we took over, we were just getting hit left and right. It was a huge battle. Like I said, there's points where I had fought hand to hand with Al Qaeda. I mean, it was just that thick. And again, coming home, nobody heard of it. It's like, are you kidding me? These were battles, and
So you're just
missions that
like
lasted
punching Al Qaeda dudes, like grabbing them and throttling them, and
yeah. Just again, things happen. I'm a stickler, and I try to take these guys in because again, the intel that comes from them
right.
is invaluable. I could have shot them, and again, we had there was lots of shooting, but in this case, I had chased one down. I wasn't just going to shoot him. I had chased him with my aid bag on and my weapon, and
Wow.
through the 100-degree temperature, and wasn't going to just shoot this guy and kill him. I was going to take him in. And so, again, it was I ended up fighting him and ended up, having to, kind of touch him up. But still, I got him. I took him in. And so, intel that comes from these guys, once we get them up to that next level, it's just invaluable. And so I knew that the more you kill, it's fine, but you're never gonna kill your way out of an insurgency like this. You need the intel. You need what's on them. You need to know. You need to find. We've got bio intel that's from their. We can tell the ODA guys are incredible. They even on the fatalities, the ones that we kill, they take the fingers, they cut them off with bolt cutters, and they can if the head's left, we can open up the eye and scan it still and
wow.
take a picture.
Wait a minute.
We get this intel. We can get a good picture of where they've been, where they were, what they've done, who they were in contact with. And
let me slow you down
incredible.
a second, Bill. So wait. So ODA, what is that?
Operational Detachment Alphas. Those are the SF guys.
And why are what's SF?
SF is Special Forces, and typically you're going to have some for every region, every province. You're going to have some SF guys or SEALs.
Why are they cutting off sometimes
for the fingerprints to roll them on the hides and bat system. So when we capture somebody, we put their fingers, all 10 of their fingers, on these hide and bats, and you can still regenerate. You can fingerprints off the dead guys. So
right.
You can roll them and.
Wow.
It's kind of it's kind of nasty, but it's again worth the intel when we can get some good fingerprints off these guys.
Okay, so let's talk about your injury, your Purple Heart. What happened?
So the air was red. I was in a cob. I was the medic. I was the senior medic for this line troop. I had 4 other medics that worked for me, and also in the town itself, Balan Rouge, which had pulled up. I was probably the senior most competent medical authority on the ground out of 100,000 people. I had worked with the Iraqi doctors, but they were, again, they're like, we just don't even have your, and not to, brag, your competence or level of trauma and or even primary care. So I worked a lot with those guys, and we had a lot of bombings there. Anyway, so air had been red. And for about 2 or 3 days, and we had a screen down that route of tanks and Bradleys, and they have their optics and they're able to see. And we've had had these big firefights on there. So me and my executive officer, his name was Captain Michael J. Metters. You pulled him up. He was killed. I think 90 days to the day that we were blown up. Incredible man. Just played football for Bowling Green. He's from Eloria, Ohio. He and I had he was my, he was second lieutenant. I'm sorry, first lieutenant. But he was just, I just loved him like a brother. I mean, just absolutely adored him. And so we went to go check the troops after air had been red because nobody can move. So we took muffins and Rippets, which are those energy drinks. And we're going to go check the line. And we had that cob, which is built up sand walls and berm around it. He tells me, "Hey Doc, get in the car, get in the MRAP, we're gonna have this other guy, Micah Alexander. He was a scout. He was gonna pull security on the 240 and on the main gun in the MRAP, and then it was gonna be Captain Metters, Mike Metters. The vehicle was the triple nickel. That was the executive officer's number. So we get out of there. I was like, "Hey, sir, I don't know how to drive." And he's like, "We'll figure it out." And because I don't ever drive, I'm always in the back with patients or
I guess it's like a specialized,
to
special vehicle. It's not just like hopping in a regular car, right?
yeah, MRAPs. If you pull one up, it's a MRAP is it's about a 27 ton vehicle, and it's a mine resistant ambush protected vehicle. And we stopped using Humvees for the most part because they're flat bottom. These have a V bottom on them. These MRAPs, yeah, that's them. And they can take an explosion. So yeah, that's it right there. And actually, it's the bottom one right there, the very bottom. Yep, and that's the kind we had right there. And so they have a V-shaped hole to deflect the blast. So I was in the vehicle, and we make a right out of the Cobb, and then a right onto the MSR, the main supply route, Route 14. And they're teasing me. They're like, "You're the worst driver in the world." And I'm like, "Man, I'm like, hey, I don't even know. It's 27 tons, man. It's just, it's not difficult to operate. It's not like you have levers and tracks to move like a tank. But it's my first time driving this thing, and they're like, "You're the worst driver in the world. You need to stay medical." Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, "Oh, you want to see bad?" And so I swerve a little bit, and I'm not doing too, I'm not. Yep. And then we wake up. There's smoke, and we wake up, and I'm like, I have killed my friends being stupid. What in the hell have I done? I am and again, I'm a stickler for things, man. I'm like, I just screw around just a little bit, and now I've killed my friends. I've run off the road, but I smell gunpowder. And and we're on our side. We lifted that vehicle.
It wasn't actually your fault.
No, it was. I hit a landmine and would have hit it, regardless. And I hit a 17-pound Russian anti-tank mine. Again, that thing lifted the vehicle up from reports. The guys that were watching it, because we were in radio contact with them coming down. We were telling them, "Hey, we're coming to bring you some muffins and stuff like that." And now we're on our side. It picked up the vehicle 27 tons and flipped it on its side, and it all landed on me. And so I'm on my side. The vehicle, my ears are ringing. I'm hurting like just incredibly bad. My left leg is just, it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat and gone to town for an hour on my leg. And we're on our side. Passenger side is on the ground, and now I've got this 6'4", college athlete of a lieutenant standing on me, and we're all waking up, and he's like trying to push on those doors. Those doors are hydraulic. The hydraulic system was all out. He was trying to push out the door up, and I guess it's about probably close to a ton weighing door. It weighs about a ton. Wow. And I was, "Hey, sir, can you get off my leg?" He's standing on me. He's like, "I'm trying to save us." I'm like, "Sir, you're not, sir, please get off my leg." Yeah. And he's like, "You don't even know." But he's out of his mind. We're all, we're all knocked out. We were severely, knocked out for a couple, I'd say a couple of seconds. Wow. And that 20 seconds seems like forever. And so, nobody's, everybody sees it, but nobody can move because, again, that route has not been checked for, IEDs, and in the middle of the night, somebody, Al Qaeda, they sneak in and they can put them in behind our vehicles. They can put them. I had a guy who was killed. Again, it's just the fog of war. Right. We had a guy who had a landmine put in behind his vehicle. When they pulled back, the vehicle exploded and trapped him in there, and he burned up in front of us. And so I don't want to say too many names of the guys and how they died. It's, I don't know who will see this. It's not a secret. It's not, but I don't want a mother or a widow. So I can tell you the parts. I just can't tell you who it was. or I can tell you the guy's name and not, the injury. But yeah,
Well,
he
I don't
we
want
had a
to
guy,
focus
so
too much. I don't want to focus too much on morbid details. I just, whatever you'd like to share with us at your discretion, of course. But before we move on to that, you've recovered, obviously. Is your leg okay? Are you? I don't know. I mean, do you have your leg still?
it was broken. It was a tibia. I broke the tibia, and so we had no medics. We had really no medics in theater.
Whoa.
Again, medics are pretty, they're a commodity in war, and so it sheared off the back of my teeth. It broke them off the molars. It broke my nose, and
The bomb did.
again, a traumatic
Wow.
brain injury. Yeah, yeah, it was a doozy. It was a doozy. And I took
Holy
about
cow.
10 days off to let that leg heal, but I couldn't leave because, again, if I had left, I would have never come back, and then they would have been short a medic. And I mean, I was busy all the time. I was constantly busy. I stayed for 15 months. I did not really. I think to tell you, I how hard I worked, it would seem inhuman, and like I'm trying to brag, but to be a medic in a line troop of 130 guys that are scouts, infantry, and tankers, and how necessary a medic would be in that kind of sustained, prolonged combat. I think you can kind of do the math. If I had left, I just would have never come back, and they would have been down, and they could not have ordered or done a requisition for another person in time. They would have, we had named operations going off all the time, and so I chose not to leave.
Wow.
I had my physician. We had one female on the whole a whole fob. She was a physician's assistant. She was really good, really sharp. But I told her, I said, "Ma'am, just sign off on it. Just keep me here. Do not send me back home." She's like, and again, and that here's the benefits of staying. Here are the negatives of staying. And so the leg I never had it set or and it's healed. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to have a corrective surgery or anything. But I'm not deformed or anything like that.
Do you have
So
discomfort, or are you able to conduct your day-to-day
Yeah, it hurts
life?
like the dickens sometimes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Wow.
hurts a lot.
So that's with you
It's
forever.
just one of those things. Again, you look at these guys and from World War II, they've got 3-4 rounds in them still from, Japanese or the Nazis, and they just never, they're like, screw it, I'm staying with my guys, and so I'd never really realized that until I was kind of in that situation. These guys later on like, yeah, I still got a German, K98 round in my 7mm in my arm, and my belly, and it just so it's just one of those things
Wow.
we when you were talking about yesterday made me so mad is that I think the more and more I get aware, the more and more I understand, and I'm kind of in the truth movement, that a lot of this stuff was preventable. There was a lot of these wars were preventable, and that is what makes me so incredibly upset and angry, Jason. And what I get from you and your guests and the programs that you do is the truth, and but sometimes that's a bitter pill to swallow. These things weren't necessary. He's a piece of shit. I hope Satan is raping him with fire every day in his ass.
You talking about
John
McCain? Yeah.
Yeah, McCain. Just a piece of shit. And these things have been known. But there's been such suppression or control of the media, and now with the internet and shows like yours and channels like yours, which I am so grateful for, Jason. Which again, I would rather do what I did than do what you do in the slings and arrows that you endure and your guests endure.
Wow.
And the lawsuits, the comments in the section. I just want to go through the internet and whoop some of these people with some of the things they say. Either you're part of it, you want to listen, or you don't. Just move on. You don't need it. This whole shill and all this other. Just go somewhere else, man. but that, I would rather endure what I did than what you do and your guests take. I really, I
Wow.
mean that honestly.
Wow, you're so
So
brave, man.
thank
I
you for what you
appreciate
do.
you saying that. Thank you. You're welcome. I don't know what to say. I'm overwhelmed. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, you do it every day, and you get up and you still have a smile. I see. You still look at things, take everything serious, and I appreciate that. It's incredible. I just don't have the patience to do that, or the again. I would ask him, please give me your address, or here's my address. Let's meet and let's have a fist fight. But you do a great job. You do a great job in kind
Thank
of
you.
brushing that off, or taking appropriate action where I would lose it.
I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to say, Bill. I really appreciate you saying that. And it means
We
a
all have
lot
our
to
part,
me.
Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. It means so much to me that
We
you're
all have our
watching.
partner strength.
Yeah. Yeah. It means so much to know that you're watching and that you acknowledge that the people that I'm talking to know what they're talking about, because I don't know. I'm not a military veteran. I'm not an intelligence expert. I'm just a guy with a production background who came up with this idea to bring everybody together. And having you on the show is a tremendous honor, and it proves the integrity and the purpose of Crowdsource the Truth. You saw this information. If you came
Yeah.
on the phone and told me, hey, you know what, I was there and this or that is not true or is true, that's
Yeah.
firsthand. So you had mentioned, Bill, in the comments, I think yesterday, that you started waking up. Tell us a bit about that. Talk about when this transition happened. You said it was the 2016 election. Did you vote for Donald Trump?
Actually, so about 2008, we were not. We had a liberal uh, finance officers. Typically, they're also the voting officer. And what they do is they do the absentee ballots. And I remember at that time that the I was still overseas. About in 2007, all of 2008, and we didn't get our ballots until after the election. And I remember we
What?
come back when we found out President Obama. I'm sorry.
That's crazy. They didn't give you a chance to vote.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was actually okay. So again, there's a lot of kismet here. There's the guy who was our JAG. I'm sure you know who he is. His name is David French. He was our JAG officer. He is from the National Review. I know him very well. I've stood waiting to get blown up in elections. David French was our JAG officer. He was with the Third Cavalry Regiment. And he's on TV all the time on Fox, on
Right.
The Blaze and stuff like that. And he is an he's a yeah, that's a young picture of him.
Yeah, that's what came
Very
up
young.
on.
Yeah.
And for people who aren't familiar
Yeah.
with the terminology, what does JAG stand for? Judicial
Judge Advocate General.
Judge Advocate General.
And
It's like a
so he
lawyer
was
for the military, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. For the good decisions and the bad decisions, he was kind of the one. And so we were all off on our own. And so, he writes for the National Review. And so I followed him. I've stayed politically, all my life, I've read the newspaper when papers were in print. I've listened to NPR, or I listened to, I read National Review. Yeah, that's him right there. We had waited in line on election day in 2000. I think it was 7 to get blown up in Intel. We were doing the observations, and it was so. Again, I'm not a huge fan of his politics, but again, it kind of goes back with the story of when I started waking up, and so we ended up not being able to vote. And I thought that just isn't right. I voted all my life and absentee ballots, and something's wrong. And so again, it's these little itty bitty things. And then we started the use of force and stuff like that. We knew we were leaving Iraq. We knew Iraq was done. And so it was a matter of trying not to lose as many soldiers in daring and audacious missions and to complete these things. And so we knew we were done. We knew it was over back then. And then, and I think when we got home, the resurgence of Al Qaeda and some of these names were popping up that I had recognized through intel reports or through, just not, they weren't, classified. Well, they aren't classified now, but, these names that kept popping up, and then incidents of resupply. And then, because I've done these things before, I've seen how when we take care of they had the Sons of Iraq, or the Lions of Iraq. These were the ones that we were supposed to be training to take over provisional authority. I got to work with a lot of these guys that were provisional authority, and they're not. These are big, kind of tatted guys with, square jaws, but we're escorting them around in Mosul. We had moved up to Mosul, and so you understand what things are they're supposed to be looking like, but what they really are. And so, things weren't adding up. The people that we were supposed to be setting up for success wasn't adding up. The things that we were supposed to be taking down weren't being taken down the way. So, again, it's a little bit at a time. It's not all at once. That I thought something's wrong here. Something's not adding up. Something is desperately. We're the news and back home is saying one thing. We're doing another thing.
Right.
And so when I got home, I still would watch like Morning Joe or CNN or even Fox. I try to split it up because I understand the difference. And myself, I'm conservative. I vote Republican. But I also I listen to NPR endlessly, and I used to, not anymore. But things weren't adding up, and I would see these missions that would go awry, and you hear about them. I still have friends who work for contracting. Again, they went from active duty and retired and have gone contracting, and things are not adding up at all. Like you don't LDS bundle, which is a load. It's like a parachute load of weapons and stuff like that. You don't do that accidentally onto Al Qaeda's position or ISIS position. You don't.
That's got to be the craziest thing imaginable.
And you remember when that was happening in 2012 and 13? It was happening all the time, and they would ask the president, "Hey, what happened with? It just doesn't go down like that. You don't, and they don't get intel accidentally. It was on purpose."
Wow.
And so, I remember watching this guy's show, and he was defending the president, and I'm, something's not right. And so I retired about 2012, and I start going to school, and I'm still working with veterans. I still know tons of guys in big Army, and then in other aspects of the Army, special operations, or they're not. Hey, this, but what they're telling me, where they're going, and what they're doing, kind of what they're doing, is not adding up. And so I guess that's about the time I just really got frustrated and just pissed off. And then when the election of 2016 comes, and I remember, again, I don't want to make it all about the Q. But that's a very significant. When I started reading that before this thing became big, I was like, holy cow, somebody's on the inside dropping some huge stuff. Huge. He's speaking the terminology. He knows the phraseology. He knows all the stuff. And this stuff is coming out. I'm like, and it's starting, this is around a little after Thanksgiving, I guess, 2 years ago. And I'm like, holy cow, somebody is going to get, because Obama arrested and tucked away CIA and intelligence guys left and right.
Yep.
Oh my God, these guys should get pardons, or should be. It's incredible what he did. And again, that's part of the thing. I'm thinking, how in the hell are these guys going to prison? These guys are going to prison for a long time, and there's and people are allowing this. What have we become? And so it's all all that together, and then I start reading these Q drops. I've been on the Chans, and I still again, it's not if you can sift through all the BS, and some of it's pretty funny, some of it's kind of gallows humor. But when I started seeing these drops, I'm like, holy cow! Somebody on the inside who knows what they're talking about is privy to this intel is dropping it. This ain't gonna last.
Well, let me ask you
There's
this.
no way.
Let me ask you this, because there's a lot of things that we've heard from QAnon that make a lot of people skeptical. And to hear you say that there was really solid intelligence there causes me to ask, I mean, do you feel like it was a mix of solid intelligence and not good intelligence? Do you feel like there was someone at the
I think it was
beginning
some
and it
disinformation.
changed? Disinformation.
I think it was all solid. I think it was the same person. The cadence, syntax, for the most part, was all the same. Again, at one time when I was military, when I was with that MI, that LARSO, we were, SEER trained, which is survival, evasion. We had diplomatic passports. I had gone and done some things that, they weren't top secret, but they were definitely at the time, they had a security aspect to them. I've got Paraguay. That picture that you show of me and all those guys is when I was with the Long Range Surveillance Detachment, and that's 107th Military Intelligence. And all those guys are either SF, Delta, or asymmetric warfare. Almost every single one of those guys, or they work for JSOC. All those guys. I went into law enforcement, and most of those guys went into special operations. I still stay in contact with them. They don't give me this and that, but when you can tell, there's just ways you can tell. And we were highly trained, LURSO guys. And when our objective was strategic intelligence up, past 120 kilometers into enemy territory. And so you can imagine all the clandestine link ups and insertion extractions and stuff like that. So I know what intel in the I guess, the CIA's part is the direct action guys. A lot of those guys, move around and they're in the same thing, and they're just sometimes they don't even know they're being moved into one box or the other. So I'm very familiar with the whole a lot of the terminology. I'm also very, very familiar that what most people expect things to look like. People's perspective is movies or books or TV series, and it's so not that way. It's so different. Things are so completely. I remember at one point getting out and reading the newspaper, and I'm not going to know kind of the back story of what's going on in Honduras, Guatemala, or Panama, or Paraguay, or another, any other country. And I used to be privy to that. It wasn't top secrets in the sense of methods and sources, but I knew some of the big picture stuff. And but so that's why I knew that the guy, whoever's putting it out, very, 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 very reliable. Some of it was disinformation, and it had to, because everybody started reading it. But I was amazed. And again, people, their perspective is only movies or TV series, and the stuff he was talking about and going on. What little I knew was 100% on it.
Huh. But how do we explain that whoever is doing that hasn't been caught? Would take that risk of?
I think it's government directed. I believe I do, and that's just my feeling from all the proofs and all of the people and all the intel. They've got this guy Ezra Watnick Cohen, I believe. He's a young guy. This administration is doing things kind of out of the box, and they had to have a back channel, because again, even with everything that people have been researching, and as well as I do on Twitter, and then you're crowdsourcing stuff that y'all get is just incredible. It's like, holy cow, Kevin Shipp and a lot of these other guys, and I myself, I listen with a grain of salt. I do know I know that there is a counter dialogue or there's operations going on that are not that are disinformation, that are to cloud and muddy things. I didn't realize the marriage and the connection between social media and intelligence, and it's huge. It's huge. These guys are, again, just go right from one intelligence agency to the board of it, or and I'm amazed. I'm amazed. Some of these are names that I recognize from the military and from DOD, and so that's why I'm fairly sure that it's not a LARP. It's not a I think you're going to have to also, even when you talk to Mr. Ship, you can't expect that he's going to tell you everything. He's got in his brain, he's got to do this deconflicting of, what I can put out, and if I go, even a step into this, I'm going to be arrested. And so again, it's a very I have to do that just reading a lot of this stuff, but I think it is legit. I don't think there's I don't follow it, and I don't. You've seen also on Twitter or on YouTube, these people almost worship Q.
Right.
That's a good way to get your heart broken. You can't worship Mr. Ship. Kevin Ship. You can't. Any of these guys that are whistleblowers, you can't, because there's just some things they can't tell you. There's maybe not there. They may not be leading you astray on purpose. It's just they can't tell you. They can't finish the sentence, or they can't even reach or a subject. Does that make sense?
They'll go to jail forever. Yeah, Kevin's told me that many times.
Exactly.
That there's things he can't discuss, and
very
we've got a very well understood situation there where if I ask him anything that he can't answer, he just doesn't answer. Now, it's interesting that you spoke about the connection between social media and intelligence. I've been speaking quite a lot about social engineers. When I say that, I'm talking about civilian contractors, individual idiots sitting in their house who are either felons, alcoholics, drug addicts, weirdos, losers, morons, for whatever reason. They decide it's a good idea to take a job fulfilling some sort of contract for some company where they come and put crappy comments in, or they make videos about me being a Jew and claiming I'm a Mossad agent. I'm sure if I was black, they'd come up with something for that. I'm sure if I was Catholic, they'd come up with something for that. But
Irish, you heard me.
They're just trying to stop me from having conversations with real individuals like yourself, like Kevin Ship, like Charles Ortel, like all the people who come on the show. But I'm interested in what you said about this connection between intelligence and social media. I'm sure you've seen the shows with Patrick Berge, who was an IT expert, talking about how he went to work for Dynology, the company that was started by Obama's national security advisor, Jim Jones. Do you know anything about Jim Jones or this company?
He's so the guy his name's
Pat Berge.
Berge.
Pat Berge.
I started watching him with Ann Vandersteel on Periscope. And, I listened to him, and again, excuse me, she'd ask a lot of questions that are really, sometimes you just got.
Bill?
You don't know. When I started seeing him being interviewed
we lost you for a second.
Because again,
hang on.
Your IT expert.
I lost you for a second. So you saw him on Ann Vandersteel, and she was asking questions about what?
You're like a couple. Well, I saw her interview him, and I love Ann Vandersteel. I think but she doesn't know the questions. She doesn't know what she doesn't know. Does that make sense? You are in IT, and you've been dealing with this crowdsource. Your crowdsource the truth, and so you understand that a lot of Brady and the. I mean, you understand. And so the questions you interviewed really enthralled me.
Wait,
you really started.
We've gotten to a part in the conversation that somebody doesn't want you to give me because your comms are getting all jammed up. Are we okay? We've still got you there. Sorry. One more time. It's not your fault. Okay. We're just getting you cut out. So he's on Ann Vandersteel. You're feeling like I know more about computers. Yeah,
and again, some of the questions to ask. And when I started seeing him going into this Jim Jones, I don't know those guys. Again, those are, I'm a dirty, no underwear changing grunt that hasn't showered in 30 days, combat medic. I don't hang around with smart folks that do IT and stuff like that. And so your interviews with him were incredible. I thought, especially when you had done one, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, as it was related to, I guess, that whatever program that's going on. I only learn from you all, because the hammer or whatever it is. I learned from you all. Now you want to know how to do a trachea, a cricoid. You want to know how to splint a midshaft femur fracture from a gunshot wound, or help split it. Stuff like that, or cut open a cyst. I'm your man. But I don't know anything about the IT part of it, the actual, and so that's what I've learned from you and watching you, which was incredible. It was hard to digest. I've had to watch a couple of those interviews with this kid. I say he's a kid, but I had to watch him a couple of times just to get stuff, and it's incredible. It's incredible the stuff that's coming out, and he seems to know. He knows what's going on. I love Ann Vandersteel. I think she's doing what she can do, but she doesn't know the question to ask like you do. Does that make sense, Jason?
It does. It's interesting, though, because, you've got all this firsthand experience seeing the fruit of Obama's presidency. And, it was an interesting comment. You really caught my attention with that focus of intelligence in social media, because I think that Barack Obama was the first social media president, in my view. We never had Twitter. He was elected in 2008, and I remember I had just gotten onto Facebook. I was communicating with some people on Facebook about, hey, Barack Obama elected president, but Facebook didn't have any influence on the election. Now, I wonder if they anticipated or perhaps they observed during his presidency the change that social media had on society. I remember hearing in grade school that JFK had won the election in 1960 because he looked better on television than Nixon, and it was the first televised presidential debate.
Wasn't sweating like Nixon, or
right?
Yeah, wasn't sweating like Nixon,
Yeah, and I think likewise, Donald Trump is the first social media president because, without InfoWars and Alex Jones and Twitter and all the independent news that we have, including here at Crowdsource the Truth, I don't think we would have gotten Donald Trump. So the stuff that Patrick Berge was telling me, which you have sort of corroborated by saying, but you're feeling the connection between intelligence and social media. It's an important connection to what Patrick Berge was saying, because this guy, who not only was he Barack Obama's national security advisor, because sometimes those guys come and go throughout the administration, here he is with a young Barack Obama, the office of president-elect. So he was there from the very first day, very involved, with a pretty green junior senator who knew basically nothing about being the president. Question becomes, to what extent was Barack Obama groomed by intelligence, whereas our current president is being attacked by them?
You're exactly right. And people, I think, with their only experience being movies or TV series or reading books, they think it's this dark chamber of Sith-like, we're going to, do this, and you will move here and this and that. A lot of it is they're just letting people do, the people in their position or advisors, or that he brought in a who's who of nefarious. These people couldn't even get security clearances. They could not even get security clearances. They were so bad. And to not be able to get a security clearance is you've got to be pretty mucked up. They'll go through these things with you and have you explain. Again, but they're getting top secret, and these higher than top secret and stuff like that. And it's just incredible how people things were manipulated, people were manipulated, and were just allowed to do what they do. I do believe there's some nefarious things with President Obama, but having him who surrounded him and who supported him throughout his life and throughout his time in office is incredible. What was gotten away with, what was just, and I don't. My feeling is that whatever the cabal or Soros or whatever these guys, whatever the end, the final. I'm not even sure we know what these people look like. That are really, I don't think it's just Soros, and I think Hillary just does what Hillary does. I don't think they have her in a meeting with the 13 representatives of a bloodline, and this will be the plan. And it's not that kind of. It's not like we see in the movies. It's not where they're just moving pieces out of the way so another piece can, something like Hillary or Bill. They're just doing what they do. It's like the song, the parable of the frog and the
scorpion, right?
You knew I was a scorpion, when you gave me a ride, and so they're just doing what they do. They're doing exactly, and so I know it sounds kind of hokey, but I do believe President Bush. I mean, I hate both Bushes. I'll help you talk about them as much as Obama, because again, I feel betrayed by those guys.
Yeah.
I've known the Bushes all my life. Being from Houston, the little family that I did have, my cousin married President H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush.
Oh, wow.
They're at St. Edward's in Houston. Yeah, he married them. And so, again, I've not met the Bushes, but I've known them all my, whole life. They've been in around the old family that I did have, and everybody hated them. And my grandparents just despised them because they didn't know what was going on. They just knew that their spirit or their not. They didn't say their spirit or order. They just knew they were crooks. They just knew they were just disgusting, people. They knew they were evil. And so I didn't realize that until later in life too. And my grandmother despised him. My grandmother was an old German, Czech battle axe, Oma. Her name was Oma. They named her Oma. My Oma was Oma. And, she just had that ability to know who was a scumbag and who wasn't. And she hated him. So I've kind of always taken that as kind of as a fact. And so,
right.
But
gotta trust grandma's
instincts. I think people are just doing what they do.
Right. Well, and I mean, you're kind of being maybe too kind to describe them as crooks, because evil definitely sounds more like it. I'm thinking about this article that was in, I guess it was the Washington Examiner, perhaps, where they talk about a credit card receipt, which, I mean, credit cards, I don't know, but a male prostitute ring that went, here it is, I've got it right here, homosexual prostitution, homosexual prostitution inquiry ensnares VIPs with Reagan and Bush. So, this was this story that kind of, it was in the Washington Times. And
do you remember these coming out, Jason, at the time?
Well, no, I mean, I was in high school when when this was 1989, so I wasn't paying attention, but this is shocking.
That kind of goes back to that whole, to me, it goes back to that whole, part of that intelligence, having and he was intelligence to the core, is, these guys, are able to, stop something here and, hey, shake some keys over here or squirrel or, whatever it is. And again, I'm sure you're like me, you read the newspaper, you from these major cities. And I don't remember any of this stuff really. Right. I don't. I mean, it's covered up well.
Yeah. Absolutely. They're experts at it, and we're seeing it happen right now in the case of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure somebody who's 17 and not that politically active, or whatever age I was when this article came out, is having a similar experience with something like Jeffrey Epstein. Some billionaire guy in jail dies. Exactly. I don't know. I don't care. People just sort of don't know. But I never saw this photo of H.W. Bush being sworn in under appointed President Gerald Ford, who was put there by Nixon just shortly after Watergate, which I'm certain H.W. Bush and his buddies. Oh, yeah, our connection is slowing down. I see that. Can you still hear me? Hello, Bill? Hopefully we'll get you back. It says weak connection. But I hadn't seen this photo. I hope we get Bill.
Hey.
Are you back?
They got us. I'm back. Hey,
I think you're back.
They got us.
I know.
They got
Something
us good,
weird
Jason.
is happening. Something weird is happening.
CIA got us good.
They don't like us talking about H.W. Bush.
I'd never seen it either.
Right. I only saw this after his death.
CIA doesn't like that.
No. This is the swearing in. I mean, to me, we got Gerald Ford standing behind him. I mean, this is cinematic in many ways, this picture. It looks so set up. I mean, where are they? Where's the background, the lighting, the dramatic, just the contrast of it and everything. Just very cinematic. But we've got a shorter man standing behind H.W. Bush. Who's in charge here is the question. I mean, he's being sworn in. Gerald Ford was appointed. I'm sure he was sworn in as president. But I think this picture speaks more than 1,000 words. We are close to the end of our hour here, Bill, and it really has been truly an honor to meet you here and to speak with you. I've enjoyed it as well. I really appreciate the kind words you had. I mean, the amazing sacrifice that you've made for your friends, for your country, for your family. The one topic that we didn't touch on, and I don't want to give this a limited amount of time, but what do you feel now when you look back on your time in Iraq? What would you say about it on Veterans Day today?
I have days that I'm not happy about it. I'm not. I have these memorials that come up where these guys have died, and again they come in leaps and bounds during the holidays, and I don't like it. I don't like it a bit. And my own mortality, they call it an Angel Day and stuff like that. And, I went through a lot. I've gone through a lot of therapy, a lot of medication. Some stuff works, and I was diligent and fervent in my recovery. There's times that I don't do as well, and there's times where I make. And so it's again, I have to, I get angry when I get a deluge of information that a lot of these things, which is kind of fake and false, and unnecessary wars and unnecessary deaths, and but again, at the end of the day, it really is not about when I was running to go treat a guy who'd been wounded or something, and again, there's a lot of funny stories. I've hit the front slope of a M1 Abrams running off to go treat guys that were just blown up, and I hit the aluminum fender part, forgot that was up there, and went smack dab on face first into into thorn bush, and but again, it's the guy to your left and right that you do all that for. You're not really, you join for mother country and apple pie and the Astros, Houston Astros, but at the end of the day, it's to not let down the guy next to you. That front slope it wiggles on the other side of that tank. There's a front slope and it wiggles. I hit that bastard with my aid bag running for a couple guys that just got blown up. It was like a 200-foot plume, and I hit that thing and went face first into sand in a thorn bush.
Wow.
Fortunately, they were in a ditch, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay? Do we need to come get you?" Tank commander's like, "You dumbass, you're stupid. You know that thing's there." Again, you do it for those guys. You don't. I had one of my tank commanders is a E7 Sergeant First Class black guy from Miami, built like a brick shit house, the most beautiful human, Jamaican muscled up guy, and he's the one who made me an addict to The Office. There's so things are not exactly like we see in movies. You know what I mean? Like, it's just an incredible. We have an incredible nation. We have an incredible military that is in this, and they're not scripted. You know what I mean? These are people that are three-dimensional, and that's who you do it for. And so, if what I think about it, I do it all over again. And again, I get into this world where in Iraq, I was, you let your ego sometimes go. You got to keep it in check. But again, these guys would do anything for me. I never went to go. If we were eating at a chow hall, which we very seldom did, they're like, "Hey doc, go in front of me. Hey doc, this, and hey doc, my mom entered you into a Dunkin' Donuts contest for a lifetime supply of coffee." I ended up winning.
Wow.
A lifetime supply. Yeah, it was crazy, man. And so we had to
So
learn how to
any
make
Dunkin' Donuts you go to, you get free coffee?
Well, they sent it all to me in Iraq,
wow.
Jason,
Wow.
at one time.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
so it was
Sent
crazy.
it all to Iraq? Oh my God.
Yeah. I was giving it away, man. It was crazy. It was nuts, but it was so much fun. It was so nice.
Wow.
I had to, say, hey, young women, young wives, hey, take care of my husband. Oh, I got him, man. I got him. And then, seeing him when we get back, I couldn't do anything, So I don't even want to talk to you. I don't even want to
face that.
Now you're a widow at 19 years old. That makes me angry. Yeah. That makes me angry. I still talk to a lot of moms and a lot of them on Facebook. And like I told you, I gave you that as my first bona fides kind of, show. You can make up anything, but with, a couple, several hundred people in the military, and mothers and daughters and mothers and fathers and husbands and wives, it's kind of a lot harder to do. But, I still talk to these people, and they still think the world of me. And I'm like, I just feel, I feel betrayed sometimes. We didn't need to do this. We didn't have to do this. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, Jason. I don't.
No, you've answered it very completely, Bill. I really appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate everything that you've done and that you continue to do. I want to wish you a really happy Veterans Day. I'm so pleased to have met you.
Thank you, Jason.
And
my honor. It's my honor.
My honor, Bill. It's
I saw you today. I saw you when we were doing our sound check. I was like, God, I watch this guy every day.
I'm really
sometimes you say, well,
ever
want to. Oh, thank you so much. And you're just an absolute gentleman. And that's another thing I absolutely has endeared me to you. Is you're always a consummate gentleman, even when you're not happy. They used to make signs of me in the talk because they said I was a Southern gentleman, and like the guy that died, the lieutenant that died, was blown up by a suicide bomber. He used to make these signs around the talk, the Tactical Operations Center, of my picture. And it would say, Doc Allen says, shut the door, please. And Doc Allen says, turn this light off. But that's what endures me to you also, is you're a consummate gentleman, even when you're upset. And, I don't think that's recognized enough. We're getting rain here. That's why I was
It's a good thing for rain in Texas.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on, Bill. It's been my pleasure. It's been wonderful to meet you, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon. Happy Veterans Day to Bill Allen and all of our other veterans out there. I want to thank everybody for watching. Bill, is there a business or a website or anything that you're doing that we could promote to the audience if people want to? No.
My job is just to drink coffee and get red pilled all day and smoke cigarettes. That's it.
Good thing you got a lifetime supply.
That's it. That's great. Yeah.
Billy, take care of yourself.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you soon.
If you need anything at all as it pertains to military or combat medicine or trauma medicine or emergency medicine or anything like that, please, you got my phone number, you got my email. Please feel free to contact me, and if you need anything like that, I do anything for you.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate it tremendously. And happy Veterans Day to you. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
You bet. We'll see you. All right. Thank you.